Fire reads this faster than you can. It starts in your walls and in the back of your brain, but soon it has spread to the front of your TV screen. Bad world, goodbyes. Despite an alarming escalation of rain, chaos, and fire, all TV stations continue broadcasting. Mobile, Alabama, Des Moines, Iowa, Spokane, Washington, Galveston, Texas, Portland, Maine, Tucson, Arizona. Stores remain open and brand name products continue record sales, cash or credit, though few people remember what to say to each other. Isolated incidents of cash register failure ring out across the country, but buying continues as cashiers attempt to estimate sales tax in their heads. Millions of people have vanished outright. The sun has not been seen for days. Congress discusses whether to add it to the list of the missing. The light of the fires that burn everywhere must be used in lieu for reading, but flickering firelight imitates most readers, so newspapers are abandoned in favor of television. Flame reads this book faster than you can. Before you can finish this paragraph, this entire book is ash. When his brown eyes first saw the light of day, there was no electron glow, neither gray nor color, to compete with the daylight in the saturation of blue sky. No program schedule published daily in paper to guide the sense of a daily life. No spin-offs or reruns or cartoon kids' sugar cereal commercials. His infancy came before TV, though there were predictions, and he knew of the predictions from an early age. He knew of them and dreamed of them and saw them and heard them. He kept them inside of him, not bothering to lock the locks. They were spices in the soup of his early years, large chunks in the hot dish of his adolescence. Of all the kindly old men who spent their days and days in the barber shop on Main Street, the dearest was Parson Brown, now retired. Forced into it, many say, for some blot on his good name long forgotten. He wore a close-fitting hat with peaks on each side and had a face like Felix the Cat. He talked in a high-pitched voice and performed magic tricks with pennies, nickels, and buttons for young Philo T. Faustus. "Philo, have you heard the story of Jesus and the giraffes?" he would ask, and immediately go into a long tale that ended on a moral message. Philo walked the 2 blocks from his house to the barber shop every day to surround himself with the old men who seemed to live day by day on nothing more than the thin mist of cut whiskers and aftershave that never seemed to be stronger or weaker, but hung like their jackets on the coat rack the same way every single day. When Philo walked through the door of the shop with his little boy sweater and little boy footsteps, the old men smiled with or without teeth and slapped their thighs. Whoever made the loudest slap would insist that Philo sit on his knee. Philo would, and swayed as magazine covers closed and the usual pennies, nickels, and buttons were dredged out of full pockets for the usual magic tricks and displays of spinning and shining. Meanwhile, in his mind, young Philo T. imagined ways to make moving pictures out of dots of light while throwing those light dots across long distances. When his brown eyes first saw the dark of night, there were no dramatic blackouts on TV commercials. There were no live and moving live telecasts of the funerals of very important people. No government sifting of TV news accounts during wartime. No station identification or technical difficulties in the middle of a fascinating movie. No game shows where your favorite contestant loses. No talk shows where the most hideous things imaginable are discussed or enacted in front of live audiences of actual real people dressed like movie stars sitting beside other imaginary real people. Parson Brown would do the famous trick where he would rub a nickel all the way into his arm and through magic powers pull it out of Philo's left ear. Then he would say, "Philo, did I ever tell you the story about Jesus and the gerbils?" And because Philo couldn't remember whether he had or not, he let him and pretended to listen while inventing TV in his mind. Other stories Parson Brown told the young Philo T. Faustus. Jesus and the gelatin, Jesus and the genial Gentile, Jesus and the genuine genius, Jesus and the geometric gyrfalcon, Jesus and the jackal, Jesus and the jagged jaguar, Jesus and the jaundiced jerboa, Jesus and the jet-propelled jellyfish, Jesus and the jointless Judas tree, Jesus and the jubilant junco, Jesus and the judicial Junebugs, Jesus and the juvenile justice. There were more. In the village where Philo grew up, there was no river flowing into the far-off sea. There were no trees or mountains that could be remembered by sight from long distances. The air in that town was stale and stable. It never went to a nearby town to breathe on it for a change. In fact, there were no nearby towns. The sounds there were truly original to it, and the images the people saw by the light of the sun or the darkness of their dreams were images that nobody else in the world would ever know. In the winter, the snow that melted there knew nothing else. But the people of the village, the cities and nations of the world were just words. The birds knew songs that people couldn't realize, but everybody knew the stars by heart and knew whether it would rain a day ahead of time or just by the feel of things, and knew who they were just by the smell and suggestion of gesture. In such an isolation, Philo-Faustus's young mind sought distances. He thought about the far away. He wondered at the things he couldn't see and the sounds he couldn't hear. He was in the same old place, but he sought different places. And because he did not know the feel of those different places, he wanted to bring them to him, to his town and his home, in order to feel the feeling the same. Such thoughts gave birth to television, which has such power to make all places seem the same. No matter how different, no matter how exotic, no matter how far away, no matter how impossible, no matter how eternal, no matter how inevitable, no matter how feeble, no matter how improbable, no matter how unnecessary, no matter how unwanted, no matter how material, no matter how spiritual, no matter how jaundiced, no matter how unfair, no matter how unwieldy, no matter how apathetic, no matter how untouched, no matter how awkward, no matter how impatient, no matter how impolite, no matter how underexposed, no matter how instantaneous, no matter how hideous, no matter how criminal, no matter how unextraordinary, no matter how seamless, no matter how peerless, no matter how silly, no matter how humorous, no matter how deadly, no matter how inconspicuous, no matter how well known, no matter how shattered, no matter how immoral, no matter how stupid, no matter how powerful, no matter how it turns out, no matter how unpardonable, no matter how unlikely, no matter how many times, no matter how long it lasts, no matter how quick, no matter how it sinks in, no matter how unintelligible, no matter how unlikely, no matter how it violates, no matter how destructive, no matter how little we know, no matter how unprofitable in other ways, no matter how we value, no matter how it battles life, no matter how unconscionable, no matter how many electrons, no matter how dead, no matter how, no matter. Television is wrong. It doesn't see itself. It needs vision from someone else. It needs someone to see it. It needs someone to foresee it. It needs someone to see it. That someone is Philo T. Faustus, among others. For our purposes, that someone is Philo T. Faustus, and nobody else matters. In one of Parson Brown's stories, Jesus and the Jelly Geronimo, the moral is that you can only invent in your mind for a while. After that while, you have to invent in the material world, or else you will have nothing but one more thing to take with you to heaven. Philo T. took the moral inside himself and began to turn his ideas into a working, televising, telegraphing, teleshowing thing. After 2 years of miscues, false starts and dead ends, 2 years in the unheated garage behind his house, 2 years of only passive attention at school while his mind and hands tinkered with light, distance, and infinity, 2 years of dedication and little else, 2 years of wiring, rewiring, and unwiring, 2 years of 2 years. After all that, he thought he had something. Edward R. Murrow would later call it light and wires in a box. He considered visions of a mechanical system of televising images impractical. Inventors working on mechanical TV used a disc with a spiral of holes cut out so that each hole would cast parts of the picture. Faustus used an electron beam trained by magnets to cast the dots. Such a system, he thought, would lead to an image of much greater resolution, clarity, realism, practicality. Such was his vision and invention. It had many bugs to imagine away. Among them, the question, does it work? He needed to do a test. He needed to fit his 2 years and his sweat and his thoughts and their product, all the work of his hands and tools. He had to pit it all to a test. He had to cast his fate and invention against that which he battled, distance. He needed to do a test that would prove the telly of television. For such a test, he enlisted the services of one Parson Brown. Faustus said, it was your stories, your morals, your time and magic, your encouragement, your pocket change and disappearing buttons, your tricks across the distance, your spirit, your face, your sense, your being and sitting and looking and remembering, which inspired me and kept me at it, he said to Brown, who couldn't pass up the tribute and chance at immortality. Yep, I'll do her, Brown said. The invention, a wild accumulation of insight and naivety, the work of a teenager with such limited knowledge of things outside his head, and the machinery, too complicated to look at easily, was far from refined and perfected. Even so, Parson Brown agreed to the test, even though there was a chance it could be risky. He was warned of the hazards, but believed enough in the importance of science and the genius of this young man, whom he sometimes considered something of a protege, and he consented to them. Turn her on and I'll take my chances. In order to make an image, the primitive camera that young Faustus built required a huge bank of hot lights. Philo strapped Parson Brown into a large, comfortable chair under the lights and cast the switch that ignited the lights and powered the camera. His instruments told him that his invention was making an image. The camera part was working just as it should. So far, so good. Now all he had to do was carry his receiving apparatus away a mile or so and see if it was properly receiving the image through distance. Drops of sweat were raining down the forehead of Parson Brown, white from the hot lights, but he said it was no problem. He told Philo to go right ahead with the inventing and testing because he was okay in the comfortable chair to which he was strapped. He said that he wouldn't mind if he sweated off a few pounds, for he believed himself to be slightly corpulent. He told Philo to go ahead and carry the experiment through. To carry a television receiver a mile or so to pick up a signal may sound quite easy today, but back then there was a little more to it. Philo's portable receiver weighed 600 pounds. He'd already winched it onto his pony cart. He gave his 2 harnessed ponies the signal and set off. Right away he heard telltale creaks. His pony cart had never before carried such a burden. His ponies strained forward to try to give the ride some momentum. The spokes that held the pony's cart's wheels and spin were bowing awfully. Philo had gotten all of 3 blocks when his pony cart splintered to sawdust and the first of his 2 faithful ponies expired. He salvaged some slats from the pony cart and slid them under his receiver. With some strong twine, he secured the receiver to the last of his ponies and hoped to ski the device away on the slats. However, the pony died after skidding it only another 10 feet. Pushing was next, but that only got Philo another inch or 2. Now Philo needed the assistance of one of the 3 people in his village who had an automobile. One of those 3 automobiles belonged to the mayor, who was also the town butcher. He had been both mayor and butcher for so long that nobody could remember his real name. Everyone just called him either Mayor Butcher or Butcher Mayor, depending on what you needed from him at the moment. There was one street in the village, and Mayor Butcher was driving down it. "Hello, Philo," he said, examining the trail of dead ponies and shattered pony cart. "What seems to be the trouble?" Philo told him a story of invention, receiver size, etc., and mentioned that he needed to get going soon because Parson Brown was waiting to be televised. Mayor Butcher said, "Okay, I will help you, but in helping you, I must teach you a moral lesson that will help you in your life. I will drive you in your receiver to a good location, but you must do something for me also, so that I can illustrate to you that you cannot get something for nothing in this world." Philo said, "Certainly, but we should try to make it quick." After thinking for a few minutes, Mayor Butcher decided that he wanted Philo to do for him. He selected several Bible passages that Philo could read to him and expound upon their lessons. In such a way, Philo could do a service to both himself and to Mayor Butcher by illuminating the mayor and mulling over the lessons to be found in the selected passages for his own proper knowledge. Reading, digesting, thinking, moralizing, expounding, smiling, nodding, okaying, hoisting, heaving, upholstery, yielding, mounting, shutting doors, igniting, driving, waving, honking at a slow-moving horse-pulled sheep cart. Up on top of what passed thereabouts for a hill, line-of-sight transmission, that's TV. Why antennae always mark height rather than length, breadth or magnitude. Where we all aspire to be, in the air, sky, heavens. Why you never make it until you reach the top. What we think we all are, on top of things. The best, the biggest, the ultimate, the topper. Our measure of beauty like a model, like a tall, skinny antenna. From the top you can see, the fast way to get around, the best ascension, where we'll never be, even higher, what we rarely see, the tops of our heads. Philo's equipment isn't working right. He has his portable generator humming, the receiver switched on, the antenna pointing in the right direction, but nothing. Its insides were shaken up quite a bit, and all the moving and crashing and killing and destroying and moralizing it took to get the whole thing up here. Repairs are in order. Hopefully, minor repairs. Hopefully. Philo did not bring his electronic repair kit, so he must make his repairs with the personal grooming tools that he did carry with him. A comb, nail file, tweezers to pick out nose hair, fingernail clippers, and little scoop for removing dirt from fingernails already short enough. These double as electronic instruments and tools and allow the young inventor to reroute wires confused in transit. Lacking solder or soldering iron, he uses his own spit. Lacking electrical wire, he makes do with the hair of his head. Lacking insulation materials, he makes do with skin and breath. Before long, he feels his work done and closes the back of his receiver. Mayor Butcher has been waiting all the time, wondering what all the fuss is about. "This better be good," he mumbles. Philo switches on his receiver and the electron gun begins firing out light itself. The screen sparks and glows with millions of dots of black and white that itch the mayor's eyes. Philo slides the band control to receive the signal being sent from his workshop. When he reaches the transmission, both he and the mayor jump back in fright. Through the immaculate haziness of this first TV image, the two see but the skeleton left of Parson Brown. Inside is secret, inside is bones, inside is what's left, inside is all those nickels and pennies made to disappear by rubbing magic. The streets of the small town in which Philo T. Faustus grew up were paved with dust. When the mighty winds of spring and autumn blew through, more than hair was tousled. The air was completely empty, and then it filled to capacity. It was the dawn of the radio age, and Philo's father, Lowell, had a local grip on the whip to beat on the sun's horses. These were the days of sound as itself. Separating it from its source was more than crazy. Taking the creak away from the chair, the grunt and hush away from the mouth, and making a box do them all was a little uncalled for and far from the imagination. Nevertheless, when the supplier to Lowell Faustus's dry goods store told him it was the latest and coming thing, the senior Faustus took it hook, line, and sinker. One day, the first radios arrived from the supplier. Their sort had never been seen before by the people of the town. These early radios were so large they simply looked loud. Something peculiar and something extraordinary is all that Mayor Butcher could think of to say. That is, that was all that he said with his mouth. The real talking he did with his money. He was the first in town to buy one. "I can hear the sea," Mayor Butcher said once he got the radio home and figured out how to hook it up. He was promised sounds from a distance and voices from many places, and he was amazed. "It's the sea all right," the people of the town said when they, by invitation, had a chance to take a listen. The sea's was a steady sound, continuous and hushing. It could send you to sleep or nod you into reverie. "I have never seen such water in my life," said the barber, "and may never will." Hearing the sea made such delirious joy. The small town of young Faustus was far, far away from any large body of water, including the ones far below it underground. Most of the people in town had never seen water wider than the eye could reach, some not even wider than the foot could step, for this was dry country, and they listened with smiles and wonder. At least one in town had seen the sea, or at least a sea. The parson had known the sea in his youth and said so. "The sea I knew," he said, "came in waves and had the tide. It was only one sea, mind you, but didn't have the same kind of undifferentiated sound that this sea has. That reminds me of the story of Jesus and the Jock and Jim Stammers and the Jerry Ball Jam Stands." "Maybe we're listening to a very large lake," said the leader of the Ladies' Aid Society. This pointed to a dilemma. There was nothing on the radio to identify what exactly they were listening to. The sound of the sea, though, did have its great fans, and others in town, people with some power and extra cash, bought radios from Lowell Faustus so they could hear the sea and feel the insides of their mouth dry with the various shades of blue they imagined to the static sound. Mayor Butcher Mayor one day asked Lowell Faustus just how do the heck we figure out exactly what we're listening to, and the senior Faustus did not know. The next time a supplier came through, Lowell asked him and the supplier said, "What sea?" Lowell turned on the radio and played to his supplier the static that the townspeople had taken to be the long, steady, sad sound of the sea. First the supplier was puzzled, then he began to smile, then he laughed out loud. "You folks are such hicks," he said, "that you don't know the difference between something and nothing. You're not listening to the sea, you're listening to the way nothing sounds on the radio. That's static. You folks are so far away from civilization that you can't only tell something from nothing, but neither can your radios receive any of the broadcasts from the great cities." He then told Faustus Sr. a little about radio broadcasts and how they carry only so far. He told him that if he wants to sell more radios, he needs to start a radio station himself so that people have something to listen to in their own homes. He told Faustus Sr. that he would bring along some transmission equipment on his next trip to give the guy a start as a broadcaster. In the meantime, Lowell Faustus decided to keep quiet about what the people in town were really listening to and let them think they were listening to water. He even lied out a story that they were listening to the sound, that what they were hearing was the sound of all of Lake Superior. "That's why the sound goes on for such a long time," he explained through his teeth, hoping his lie wouldn't show too loudly. A few days later, the transmissions began, broadcasting from the space behind the cash register in the dry goods store. Programs of music played on gramophone records and the comments and performances of people passing through the store. Mayor Butcher giving a daily report on village news and ruing on the misfortune that he wasn't able to sit at home and listen to his reports on his own radio. The broadcasts made more and more people desire a radio of their own, and many more of the people in town saved up their pennies or applied for layaway so they could take home this wonderful thing. After a time, the novelty of the programming services began to wear thin. The senior Faustus only had so many records to play, and had spent enough on the transmission equipment so that it would be some time before he had enough money to supplant his meager supply of recorded music. Some of the broadcasts that originated from the furniture store were interesting. For example, the barber had a radio in his barber shop. Some of the barbershop regulars for a while took to hanging out at the furniture store and beginning the usual barbershop talk as a transmission there. But then the other barbershop regulars, after listening to their furniture store counterparts talk on the radio, wished to speak their end of the conversation, and did, but the furniture store folks could not hear them back. So these radio-aided barbershop talks became a little one-sided, which takes getting used to. Plus, the programmer, Difficulties arise when attempting to both maintain a regular radio broadcast while carrying out the duties of running a dry goods store. Business drew Faustus Sr. away from the operation of his station, just as the operation of the station drew him away from business. Attending to customers meant racing back and forth, trying to keep the records playing, or occasionally broadcasting live the transaction. Lowell Faustus wanted to go home and listen to his own radio in the evening, but instead he had to stay at his shop and continue the broadcast day. In addition, there's only so much that a furniture store owner and radio pioneer has to say, even if he rarely is at a loss for words, and this produced awkward moments. The townspeople often tired of these broadcasts because they knew that they were paying more attention to the broadcast than was the person who was running the show. And so they switched back to the sound of the sea, or, worse entirely, switched off the radio and re-experienced the sights and sensations of the real life around them. Faustus Sr., proud of a particular program he had made, would ask his fellow townspeople if they had been listening, only to learn that some had turned off their radios to dispose of household ants, bake a batch of cookies, read, or go to the bathroom. Sometimes in his lonely evening broadcasts he wondered out loud if anyone was indeed listening. Young Philo T. Faustus had a few ideas. When most kids his age were satisfied with running and jumping and playing around on playground equipment, he was working on unlocking the secrets inside himself, the first steps to unlocking all consciousness in the universe. He bugged his dad that he'd like to try running the furniture store radio station. He was considering the ultimate sounds of our being, the excitement of nothing, the simplicity of everything. He wanted to portray sounds as if each were the first and the last. At least he felt deeply inside himself that he wanted to do something with sound, but wasn't certain how he would describe it in words. That uncertainty must pass on to me, who must also puzzle and ultimately despair at translating such thoughts and sounds into a pattern of black ink on paper. His father chose to let him try, and Faustus's first broadcasts began. Taking his cue from the popularity of the sea sound static broadcasts, he sought to bring to his listeners sounds that they knew but had not altogether considered. By isolating sounds from their source and catapulting them through the air, he sought to imbue them with sensations and meaning often absent completely in their day-to-day existence. He began with the sea-induced water motif, the sounds of water dropping, of water swished in his mouth, of water running down a drain and of water still in a glass. He pre-associated his next sounds off the glass introduced by the last water sound. He rolled around small objects in the drinking glass, marbles, rocks, sand itself, creating a metaphor centered around the glass's beginnings and ultimate ending. Ultimately, this train of sound ended with the glass's demolition, a sound that rocked the now enraptured listeners into a near frenzy of anxiety and horror. The sounds continued, manufactured in a slow, steady stream of consciousness by young Philo T. Faustus. Knocks on doors, keys turning, windows opening, the tapping of feet, the pointing of fingers, the creaking of floors. Sounds with the noise and sounds mostly submerged in imagination and mightiness. Sounds so simple they could barely be believed. Sounds so complex they could always be believed. The sounds of unreal, real life, the sounds of the day-to-day of the sun up, sun down, and repeat, the sounds of seasons and stars and of uncut hair and the opening of eyes, the sound of the stars and of the dry goods store, the sounds of the street, the hill, the tree, the rose, the flower barrel, the pencil, and the birds in the trees, sounds that were meant to be today and others meant for yesterday and tomorrow, sounds both of comfort and of discomfort, sounds that you knew and that you never. On the radio's justness of things, the illusion of things as themselves, sometimes a human sound, sometimes young Faustus breathing, but almost all else is the things that surround people and what those things have to say, as if they had never before been noticed, never before been asked, what we always lived under the influence of but never paid attention to, presence made identifiable, made powerful and noticed by a sound, existence without a story, stories without the kind of movement we take for granted, knowledge that stays and waits, but nothing of that kind. A word like waiting says nothing about it, simply fills space less well than the object it tries to describe, and there's the point. So instead, one must listen and be warned, listen and remember and know how to look and listen and feel again. The vibrations, the sound waves, move from the big radio box to those things themselves around you. The point is that then you notice. The point is awareness of such littleness. The point comes from sound and tries, or else it has no agenda but still reveals. Or so it was hoped, or so you'd think. Down to the dust on your floor, the paint climbing the walls, curtains knowing the touch of the breeze and so much more, inside sound seeking protection in the window panes, sunlight and shadow saying the darkest, brightest things, and only being stepped on for all their effort. Young Faustus was amazing. He could turn sound into glue. His broadcast could hypnotize all listeners into a reverie. There was something in his show about appreciating the simple things around you, just knowing them rather than forget accepting the things all around you that really make you and border you and extend you. But his radio left the townspeople wanting less of the life around them and more of his radio. They completely stopped everything to lose themselves in his sounds, to submerge themselves in his sounds, or not sounds. Emergencies would not emerge, accidents would not act, not in this town, not as long as the radio was saying things that the things Faustus revealed were saying things. I saw you on TV. A parable of parking. Last stop in the one-way zone. 2 for the road, 1 fired of coffee, 1 of petroleum. Ripping up the roadside, man and machine, flesh and tinted glass, yellow lines broken and repaired, bus stops frowned upon, truckers given the thumbs up, knowing where you are by the brain of asphalt. Parking to the stars, stalls for one and all, many white lines, many gates to pass through and levels to choose from. A place to put your movement while you stand still, concrete of open air rising like a stack of perfect square pancakes. Shopping and parking, parking and shopping. Song of the shoppers. The latest, and this is a bunch of people are singing this all at once. The latest fashions catch our eye, but check the price before you buy. A bargain makes you feel your best. The search for value is our quest. Before we'll bring our cash to action, you'll give us customer satisfaction. Mephisto says, you shoppers have the hardest part. The act of buying is an art. To purchase leisure is your aim, but outlet shopping is no game. Search high, search low, from spree to spree, your spending saves democracy. Faustus says, this shopping mall, I must declare, is really more than I can bear. Mephisto says, the human race has passed you by. Its pleasures pin you to the sky. From far away your voice is heard in language such as of a bird. Such cynicism has to stop. What do you mean you hate to shop? Faustus says, I don't enjoy it. I am old. I don't regret when signs say sold. A purchase doesn't thrill me deep. A bargain missed, I'll lose no sleep. I'll go my way, I'll get no rise if fashion shirts my perfect size. Mephisto says, now tell me, where is fancy bread? It's in the mall, you old shithead. And if you search for youth and all, you'll find them in the shopping mall. In the mall of the all. Mephisto leads Faustus by the hands. Everything is here and more. Your best bet is the knowledge store. And if it's wisdom that you seek, the Hallmark store has the quote of the week. Faustus says, your shopping mall has sowed the seed. I see so many things I need. The cash register computes the sales tax. Faustus, using both hands to carry his shopping bag, says, the first sale gives me needed strength. My shopping hour requires more length. You witness shopping's new diehard, empowered by his credit card. The shopping chorus now joined by Faustus. The latest fashions catch our eye, but check the price before you buy. A bargain makes you feel your best. The search for value is our quest. Before we'll bring our cash to action, you'll give us customer satisfaction. Mephisto says, I'll give you customer satisfaction so you can put your cash to action. Bargains great and bargains good. Hellmart gives you heavenly food. Everything you want and more, find it at your local store. And if you do not want it yet, we'll lure you on your TV set. Such a promise, such an ad, if you don't get it, you will go mad.